Hi, welcome back to the Crossroads Calligraphy YouTube channel. My name is Renee and my pronouns are she and her. And today we are talking about calligraphy with a flat brush. This is a fun way to practice calligraphy. It's mostly better for broad edge calligraphy scripts. And what we'll be going over today is how to mix paint for it, what different kinds of things you can use flat brush calligraphy for, and how to hold your brush to get the best mobility out of it. So I will go ahead and flip the camera and we'll get started. Uses for brush calligraphy are endless, of course, but one fun and interesting thing about it is that it's very artistic. So I was learning brush Romans from Loredana Zega. But one thing that she shared, one way she uses these is that she'll write a collection of the letters and then rip the pages apart. So you can end up with some different and interesting compositions. I actually did this brush calligraphy on fabric and designed a brush roll so you can store your items in it. But this is what it looks like from the back. Just some nice brush letters, again, like different saturation of the paint. Different pieces of the letters are visible, so it's still interesting and likable, but not as specific and concentrated as some of our other calligraphy work can be. Okay, so first I'll go over the materials that you'll need to work with brush calligraphy, specifically with the flat brush. So I have kind of a bunch of different flat brushes here, and I'm just showing you the different variety because I want you to know that probably whatever you have is just fine. Like this I sometimes use for a glue brush during bookbinding. This is for murals. So as long as it has a flat edge, and you also want to make sure that there's no dried paint throughout the bristles, that they're kind of well cared for. And then I also have, a used paper towel just to place my brush down in case I need that. Okay, then I have a little jar of water, some acrylic paint, and then you need a container for your paint that has a flat sides, either a square or a rectangle. I think this is actually maybe a little too rounded for what I need, but as long as it has a flat edge, because that's where we're going to be scraping the paint from. And then I forgot to mention also that you need a different paintbrush that you're going to use just to blend the colors. So because we're going to be mixing the acrylic paint to a certain consistency. This is a dog food container that I'm reusing, and I like it because they have lids. And of course, you'll need paper. I'm just using like a sketch page to test the consistency of the paint out on, and then I'll grab a different piece of paper when I'm making a more formal lettering piece. So let's move on to mixing paint. So the way that I learned about brush calligraphy is what we're looking for is, in this style anyway, is enough paint in the brush to make a mark, but little enough paint in the brush that it creates a transparent stroke, so we can see kind of the layering of the two different strokes on top of each other. We can kind of see how the letter was made. And there's still that movement to it, but it's a lightweight letter that more focuses on the energetic movement of it, of the brush. Where in, for example, this page, it was so my paint was too thin here, and when we have thinner paint, what that means is we have more coverage. And then by comparison, the paint is almost a little bit too thick here. So something in between that, where you can see where the strokes are coming together, is what we're kind of looking for in our brush calligraphy. Okay, so my goal is to get this mixed to the consistency of like a heavy cream. So I'm going to use my pipette, and I promise it's clean on the inside. And I'm just going to drop a little bit of water in there, and then use my mixing brush to just kind of mix that around. And so the reason I'm using a mixing brush is so that I want to get the paint to the right consistency before I load up my lettering brush with it. And that way I don't have different consistencies of paint inside the brush, I just have one. So that'll give me more consistent and reliable lettering. So this is still a little bit too thick. And you may have to play with yours too. It's going to depend, honestly, it's going to depend on a lot of factors for you, like the weather, where in your region, how old your paint is, what kind of paint that you're using, how much water you add, even the effect that you want to go with. So just keep those factors in mind, that this is something that you're going to have to kind of play with until you like it, because after all, it is your work. I'm just going to get my brush wet a little bit and rinse out all the water, just so the bristles are uniformly wet. And that way it should pick up the paint more easily. So my brush is now damp, and what I'm going to do is load my full paintbrush with paint. Okay, so now it's full. It's full of paint, and we have paint all the way from the bristles up to the, I hope I say this right, the ferrule, or the place that the bristles come out of. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, you can see I'm kind of wiping it on the flat part already, is wipe most of the paint out on this flat edge. And what that's doing is it's making a uniform edge on the paintbrush. Okay. And when I grab more paint, what I'll be doing is I'll just be dipping the tip of the brush into the paint that's there. I don't want to reload the whole thing again. I'm just going to be working with mostly with what's already within the bristles. Okay, and then of course this is my test page, so I'll do some tests. Again, we're working with a broad-edged tool. So this is going to be ideal for uncial, italic, any of the Gothic scripts that you'd like to do. You could use foundational or humanist with this. So with those, of course, we work with a pen module, and that's going to tell us that the width of the edge of the tool tells us how tall to make the letters. So I can measure that quickly. We'll say we're doing italic script, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, so this is how tall I want to make my letters. All right. There it is. Now I can sleep tonight. All right, that's what I was looking for. This is what it looks like from the side. Is that my fingers are way above, probably at least 1.5 inches above the edge of the brush where the bristles start. And then, so there's like a triangle here, and my ring and pinky fingers are acting like the tripod. They're supporting my my upright hand, and my wrist is kind of guiding it. Now this means that my entire arm is moving along the page. This is a good movement to practice with a pencil. I'll put a link to pencil calligraphy here. But so then as I write, I'm pulling things along. I'm pulling the brush along. And again, I'll dip and everything and then come back to this brush hold. Okay, so off camera I went ahead and drew some guidelines on the page. I always work with guidelines, or for the brush calligraphy I still did a module like this, and then I just laid the card next to where I was about to write, so that I could still see how big the letter should be. And then I also covered up my paint while I was making those lines. So so now we'll see how this brush calligraphy goes. So I'll be working with italic script and hoping for the best. Make sure there's no extra hairs in my brush here. And again, I have my vertical grip going, and I want to go slow. I want to write slow. Okay. Pick up a little more paint. It's a beautiful blue. I actually mixed a little too much paint because we don't really need much for brush calligraphy. But that's why I like a container with a lid, because now I can use it for a painting that I will do later this week. So there's that. There it is. Sometimes I get a little I get a little afraid to have too much paint, and then I end up, and that's true just generally, not only in calligraphy. So even though it should be a dry brush, you still want enough paint in it that it'll move and show up. Right? So the whole point is for someone to read it. See if I can get away with adding a little more pigment right here. Oops, that's all right. It's practice. Brush. So that was calligraphy with a flat brush. Again, it's better for broad edge scripts like italic or uncial or foundational. One other thing that I wanted to point out was just to make sure to wash your brush thoroughly right after. Like, don't try not to let your paint dry inside the bristles, and don't try not to leave it in your water jar overnight. Both of those things will distort the shape of the bristles, and then eventually that'll come out in your calligraphy later. So, I mean, even though the rest of the brush looks kind of broken in, the bristles still behave the way that they are intended to behave. So do take that extra step and precaution. leave any questions or comments down below. If you decide to try this out, I'd love for you to tag me or send me a picture of what you came up with, and we'll see you next time for another tutorial. Thank you. We'll see you again soon.